Buenos días, bienvenidos al noveno Foro de la Mujer, espacio de diálogo y reflexión para que pensemos soluciones de este mundo con conflictos. La pandemia del COVID-19 nos ha enseñado que el lema del colegio, ser para servir, se puede aplicar desde el hogar, se puede aplicar desde todos nuestros espacios, desde nuestros trabajos, que las distancias sí pueden volverse mucho más cercanas y podemos pensar mucho más en colectivo en estos tiempos. Claro, si se cuenta la tecnología para ello y que hay múltiples problemáticas todavía que requieren nuestra atención. Hoy en este foro nos estamos reuniendo muchas personas desde organizaciones, instituciones, colegios y también desde nuestras casas para hablar sobre todas esas cosas posibles que podemos hacer para solucionar. Bienvenidos. Orden del día. Primero, himno de Colombia. Segundo, himno del Gimnasio Los Portales. Tercero, palabras de apertura a cargo de nuestra rectora Beatriz Gómez de Durán. Cuarto, presentación de Candice Mama, conferencista central del noveno Foro de la Mujer. Sexto, aclaración logística. Muchas gracias por su asistencia. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Primero, himno de Colombia.
Oh, gloria inaccesible, oh, júbilo inmortal, en surcos de dolores. El bien germina ya. Oh, gloria inaccesible, oh, júbilo inmortal, en surcos de dolores. El bien germina ya. Cesó la horrible noche, la libertad sublime derrama las auroras de su invencible luz. La humanidad entera que entre cadenas gime, comprende las palabras del que murió la cruz. Oh, gloria inaccesible, oh, júbilo inmortal, y en surcos de dolores, el bien germina ya, el bien germina ya. Oh, gloria inaccesible, oh, júbilo inmortal, en surcos de dolores, el bien germina ya.
Segundo, himno de nuestro colegio Gimnasio Los Portales.
maneras de ser y pensar. Las altivas alumnas portales, nuestro himno vamos a entonar. Fortaleza del saber, fortaleza del amor, fortaleza de superación. A luchar por nuestro hogar, a luchar por nuestro Dios, a luchar por nuestra nación. Con tesón, sacrificio y esmero, nuestros padres unieron su esfuerzo, dedicando su tiempo y su fuerza, construyeron nuestra fortaleza, fortaleza del saber, fortaleza del amor, fortaleza de superación. A luchar por nuestro hogar, a luchar por nuestro Dios, a luchar por nuestra nación. De la mano de nuestros docentes formaremos la patria soñada. Un granito de arena seremos por lograr esa paz anhelada. Fortaleza del saber, fortaleza del amor, fortaleza de superación. A luchar por nuestro hogar, a luchar por nuestro Dios, a luchar por nuestra nación. A formar mujeres integrales, responsables con la sociedad, orgullosas alumnas portales, nuestro lema sabremos llevar. Queremos ser para servir mejor. Queremos ser para servir mejor. Queremos ser para servir mejor. Queremos ser para servir mejor.
Tercero, palabras de apertura a cargo de nuestra rectora Beatriz Gómez de Durán.
Beatriz, para un minuto, por favor. Tienes el micrófono apagado. Préndelo, por favor, y vuelves a comenzar. ¿Ya? No, ya.
Mis disculpas, la tecnología. Buenos días. Un saludo muy especial a todos los asistentes a este Foro de la Mujer, a este 9º Foro de la Mujer. Es una bienvenida de brazos abiertos a pesar de la distancia. A los invitados especiales, a los panelistas, a los estudiantes, a los profesores y a las directivas que están escuchándonos. El 9º Foro de la Mujer, organizado por el Gimnasio Los Portales, Soluciones para un mundo en conflicto. Teniendo en cuenta la coyuntura de la pandemia producida por el COVID-19, el Departamento de Individuos y Sociedades ha organizado el primer foro virtual, procurando mantener su esencia, conocer múltiples perspectivas realidades y coyunturas actuales a partir del diálogo y la reflexión. Adicionalmente, es gratificante ver la respuesta de las instituciones que se sumaron a la cita de este foro, alcanzando los 411 participantes. Esperamos producir en cada uno de ellos la chispa para proponer soluciones en un mundo de conflicto. En esta ocasión, el equipo organizador del foro logra traspasar fronteras y traernos en la conferencia central a Candice Mama, una de las mujeres más inspiradoras del mundo, según la revista Vogue, nombrada por la Unión Africana de Naciones y la Organización de Naciones Unidas como una de las personas que más ha contribuido con la construcción de paz en África. Candice, desde su país, Sudáfrica, compartirá con el 9º Foro de la Mujer su historia, donde evidenciará el poder del empoderamiento, el valor del perdón y el alcance de la reconciliación. Reflexiones urgentes en nuestro contexto. Para nosotros es un honor contar con su presencia. Adicionalmente, aprovechando las ventajas de la virtualidad, logramos hacer una difusión mayor al evento y hacerlo asequible, facilitando el acceso al público en general. Este año contamos con la participación de las instituciones educativas Aprender, Argelia, CIEDI, Colegio Emilio Valenzuela, Institución Educativa Distrital Cundinamarca, Instituto Francisco José de Caldas, Colegio Jaime Hernando Garzón Forero, Colegio Jorge Isaac, Hacienda Los Alcaparros, Colegio Knightsbridge School, Gimnasio La Montaña, Colegio Las Margaritas, Gimnasio Los Andes, Colegio Los Caobos, Marymount, Maximiliano Colbert, Newman School, Parques de Bogotá, Richmond School, Colegio Tilatá y 21 Ángeles. También tendremos 15 conferencistas que nos acompañarán en esta jornada de diálogo y reflexión. Agradecemos de antemano sus ganas de aprender sobre los temas que planteamos y que requieren toda la atención, tales como la delicada situación de personas en constante desplazamiento, ya sean nuestros mismos compatriotas u otras que, escapando de dinámicas de conflicto, se embarcan en difíciles jornadas sin conocer cuál será su destino. Las situaciones de comunidades que se están empoderando gracias al acompañamiento de organizaciones no gubernamentales que les ayudan a generar proyectos productivos y de reconocimiento de su historia. La tensión que genera el uso o el abuso de los recursos naturales en el territorio colombiano, que se debate entre el aprovechamiento de la biodiversidad o la explotación de sus recursos. Y por último, el reconocimiento tanto de prácticas ancestrales como de nuevas alternativas que han permitido fortalecer el tejido social y aprovechar la tecnología en pro del desarrollo y el mejoramiento del bienestar de las comunidades y los individuos. El gimnasio Los Portales los recibe sabiendo que para dialogar no necesitamos estar en el mismo espacio y que para solucionar los problemas nacionales o internacionales, lo primero que se necesita es la voluntad de querer aprender y comprender desde múltiples perspectivas que permitan reflexionar y consolidar soluciones reales para un mundo en conflicto. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en este foro. Todos vamos a aprender maravillosas cosas para que podamos aportar a nuestro país.
Muchas gracias, Beatriz. Cuarto, presentación de Candice Mama, nuestra súper invitada central del foro.
A partir de este momento les vamos a solicitar a las personas que se encuentran en el canal de inglés, si lo requieren, pasarse al canal de la traducción. Welcome everyone. In this opportunity, we are very honored to have Candice Mama as our keynote speaker. Candice is one of the Pop Magazine top 33 most inspiring women alongside Nicole Kidman, Michelle Obama, and Malala Yousafzai. She was named by the African Union and the United Nations as one of the top 20 African women who have contributed in building peace in Africa. 2020, as the United Nations celebrated 75 years, they chose 75 people to celebrate and honor. Candice was chosen as of one of them. Her work in forgiveness, reconciliation, and trauma began after her story of forgiveness, her father's murderer, made international news. Her story was the base of the documentary It's a Pleasure to Meet You. I'm very excited to welcome Candice to our country, Colombia. I had the pleasure to meet her in the Peace and Beyond conference, which was an international event in Northern Ireland, where we had the chance to talk about the importance of reconciliation in societies like ours. Welcome, Candice. Thank you for being a part of the Noveno Foro de la Mujer. We know your conference will impact our systems and make them reflect about themselves and their role in society. Thank you, Candice.
Hello, Caro. Hello, everybody. I am so incredibly honored to be here today, and I really, really need to learn Spanish because I love the language, I love the people, and I love Colombia. And I am making a promise that I am going to learn Spanish so that the next time I give this talk, I can give it in a language that, you know, is much more fluent and passionate like Spanish. So thank you so much for having me today. As Caro said, her and I met in Northern Ireland in Belfast, and we did speak about how many commonalities Colombia and South Africa have. I come from a very beautiful country, much like Colombia. South Africa is known for its food and its, nature and its animals, but we are also known for our deep conflict. South Africa, just 26 years ago, was in a state called apartheid. And for many of you who may not know what apartheid is, it was a system whereby Black people were separated from white people, and Indian people were also separated. So everyone was living within their own silos. But it was so much more than that. Apartheid was also a deeply violent system. So people that were very different or people that did not fit the mold of whiteness tended to get into not only legal trouble, but very physical trouble. And so I'm going to take you back to when I was born. I was born in 1991 in my beautiful country. Unfortunately, when I was born, my father, when I was only 9 months old, was brutally murdered by an apartheid assassin by the name of Eugene de Kock. And so as I grew up, I knew that my father had been murdered, but I had also known only one other thing, the picture of the man that had killed him. And so around the age of 9, my mother had bought a book. And on the cover of this book were pictures of different men. And she pointed at one man and she said, "This is the man that killed your father." And I remember I looked at him. He was a white man, very big. He had these big glasses. And I remember that picture stayed in my mind. However, it was when I was 9 years old that one day I decided that I wanted to see what was inside the book because I'd only ever seen the cover. And every time people would come and visit our family, whether it was friends or, my aunt, my mother would say, go get the book. And I would run and I would get this book and I would give it to my mother. And every single time she would open the book and she'd send me out of the room. And everyone who would see what's inside the book would either cry or scream. And I remember thinking, I want to see what's in this book. Why is everyone crying? Why is everyone screaming? And so one day I sat outside the door and I listened. What did everyone see? And I heard it was a picture of my father. This made me so excited because I remember thinking that, okay, I only have 4 pictures of my father. And if I see this one in the book, I'll have 5. And I was so excited. And so the other thing I had to hear was what page everyone was turning to. So I sat at the door and I listened and I wrote down the page on my hand very quickly. And I ran and I thought, yes, when I get an opportunity, I'm going to see this picture. So a few days passed and my mother left the house and I was home alone and I was so excited. And so I ran to the cupboard. I grabbed the book and I sat at the edge of the bed and I opened the book. And as I was paging in this book, I started seeing different types of pictures, very violent pictures. And so I paged and finally I got to the picture. And the picture of my father that was in the book was his burnt body clutching a steering wheel and his eyes had popped out. And I remember thinking, what? It looked like something you would see in a movie. It looked like something that had been created in our minds. And I remember thinking, I closed the book very quickly and I threw it at the back of the cupboard. And I ran to my room and I just started to cry. And I remember thinking, I can never tell my mother what I've done. And so as I grew older, I started to get very angry. And I started to get really, really depressed, really upset. And I would always feel as though I needed to fight, whether it was fighting someone or something. And so one day I was around the age of 16. And I remember I used to be a runner. And I used to think I'm so fit and I'm so athletic. And the anger really made me compete really hard. And one day I went to bed and I felt the pain in my chest. And I thought, whoa, what was that? And I thought I was having a heart attack. And so I went to my mother's room and I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And my mother looked at me and she quickly rushed me into the car and she rushed me to the hospital. And so when I got to the hospital, the doctor, checked me and he kept me overnight. The following day, the doctor wanted to speak to me and my mother. And he sat us down and he said, in my over 20 years of experience, I have never seen stress symptoms so severe in someone your age. And then he said, your body is killing you. And if you don't change something, you're going to die. And I remember being a 16-year-old thinking to myself, oh, I'm going to die? Really? And one day, a few days later, I remember thinking, what was this? Why was I feeling this way all the time? And now that it was killing me, I really needed to figure it out. And I had a thought one day. And the thought was, Eugene killed your father. And by you living like this, you are letting him kill you too. And that moment changed my life. From that moment, I decided that I did not want Eugene to win. And so I decided that I was going to live. And so I started taking actions and making decisions that would allow me to be happy, that would allow me to stay alive, that would allow my mind a break from the pain it had been experiencing. And so as the years went by, slowly I started to get a little bit better, a little bit better, and a little bit better. However, I reached the age of 23 And I thought, okay, I think I'm good. I think I'm fine. But I got home one day and my mother said to me, I just received a call from the National Prosecuting Authorities, and they want to know if we would like to go and meet your father's killer. And I remember taking a deep breath and saying yes. I said yes so quickly. But the reason I said yes is because I knew in that moment that if I did not go and meet him, I would regret it for the rest of my life. And so as the days went, my older brother said, no, I don't think I'm going to go. And then my mom said, I will go if anyone goes. I won't go if no one goes. And so I remember saying to my mother, I am going. And so the day came, my brother came along, my younger brother came, my grandfather and my mother decided that we were all going to go see Eugene de Kock in prison. And so we were driving and going to the prison. And as we were driving, these thoughts started to run through my mind. Eugene de Kock had killed my father during apartheid 23 years ago. And I started to think, will he remember me? Will he remember my family? Will he remember my father? And most importantly, will he care? And so as we got to the prison, they walked us in, at the prison guards, they walked us in and they sat us down at a very long table. And so I sat here, then everyone else sat across from me. And then there was a chair over here for the pastor, and then an empty chair just here where Eugene would be sitting, and everywhere else was the rest of the guards and the prison security. And so they said to us, don't worry, don't be alarmed. Eugene will be here at any minute. And so I was speaking to my brother on the side, and I turned around first. And as I turned around, Eugene was there, as though he had appeared by magic. I didn't hear him. I didn't see him walk in. He was just sitting there. And he looked exactly the same as the picture I had seen on the cover of the book. He had the glasses. He looked as big as I remember him. And I remember thinking, the moment is here. He's here. And the priest said to us, Eugene is here. Let us start the meeting. And so they started introducing each of us individually. They started with my mother, and they said, that is Sandra Mama, widow of the deceased Glennock Masilo Mama. And Eugene looked at my mother, and he leaned forward, and he said, pleasure to meet you. Then he leaned back. And then as the priest introduced all of us, Eugene would look at all of us, and he would say, pleasure to meet you, then lean back. And so the priest asked, I just want to know what happened. Who wants to go first? And so my mother said, yep, I will go first. And my mother asked the crucial question. She said, I just want to know what happened to my husband. And because my family never knew what had happened to my father. And so Eugene said that my father was identified as a problem. And so they needed to somehow kill him. And so they sent someone into my father's camp because my father was working for one of the other political parties. And this man was to win over my father's trust. And so when my father started to trust him, this man set up an ambush for my father. And so my father, being a very skilled driver, but only being 25 years old, decided that he was going to go on this very quick trip about an hour away from where we were living, and he was going to come back very quickly. And so that morning, my father, said bye to my mother and said, I'll be back before nightfall, so don't worry. And my mother kept on worrying, but she couldn't put her finger on it. And so as my father was driving into the city, Eugene de Kock and his team had been waiting for him. And so as my father's car was coming under the bridge, the team started to shoot at my father's minibus. When Eugene de Kock at the top of the bridge saw that my father's car wasn't stopping, he ran down the bridge and he emptied out his gun on my father. When the car came to a stop and they still saw signs of life in the car, they doused them all in fuel and then they set them alight. And so this was the first time we had ever heard about what had happened to my father. And so as the questions went on, my brother asked the question, my other brother asked the question, my grandfather asked the question. And then I had no questions. And then my mother asked, but why my husband? There were so many people within the movement. Why my husband? And Eugene de Kock said one thing that broke my heart. He said, no reason. There was no reason my father needed to die that day. And so it felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach, but I was like, and so my mother started and she said, okay, Eugene, I forgive you. And then my brother said, I forgive you. And then my younger brother said, I forgive you. And my grandfather said, I forgive you. And then it got to me and I was the final one. And I said, hello, Eugene. And he said, hi. And I said, I want to say I forgive you. But before I do, I want to ask you one question. And he looked at me and he said, anything. What's that? And I said, do you forgive yourself? And he looked at me confused, a little shaken. And he said, every single time I meet a family, that is one thing I hope they never ask me. Then he looked away and he wiped the side of his eye because a tear had come down. And he looked back at me and he said, when you have done the things I've done, how do you forgive yourself? And in that moment, I started to cry. I just cried and cried and cried. But what surprised me was not that I was crying for myself. It was that I saw a human being sitting in front of me. And I realized that there was nothing I could say or do to take away his pain. And there was nothing he could say or do to take away my pain. And in that moment, I just said to him, I forgive you. And so the meeting ended while I was still crying. And I stood up first and I walked around because I was the closest to Eugene. And I said to him, would you mind if I gave you a hug? And he looked at me shocked. He took a breath and he looked at me to make sure I was sure. Then he stood up and he was so much taller and bigger than I am. Then he looked at me and he held me really tightly. And he said to me, I am so sorry for what I've done. And your father would have been so proud of the woman you have become. And he released me and I left and Eugene stayed. And so after that moment, after that whole encounter, I left and I thought about what had happened. This man who had been living in my head this whole time, who had taken away my father, the same hands that were used to take away my father's life were the same hands that held me. And I remember thinking, wow, I just hugged the man that killed my father. And so I decided that day that I was going to advocate for Eugene's parole. So I wrote an open letter to the government and I asked them to release Eugene. A few months later, to my surprise, the government decided to release him. And so Eugene got bail and he got parole. And I remember people would walk up to me and they'd say, hey, aren't you the woman that set a prisoner free? And I remember I would look at them and I would smile because I would say to them, no, I set 2 prisoners free that day. One was myself and the other was Eugene. Because what I came to understand and what I came to realize is that when we hold on to pain, it hurts us again and again and again. However, when we choose to forgive, we take back our power. We say, I refuse to be traumatized by this pain any longer. I refuse for this person or this thing or this moment to continue to have control over my life. And the day you decide to do that, you realize how powerful you are. Because the thing is with life, people are going to hurt us. Things are going to hurt us. But we are not defined by those things. When we forgive them, when we release them, we set ourselves free. And we realize that our power has been and will always be within ourselves. So when I say you should forgive, I'm not talking about doing it for them or for that person or for that thing. I'm saying do it for yourself, because you deserve to be free. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to achieve your dreams, and you deserve to become whatever it is that you see in your mind. No limits. And when you're holding on to anger or pain or what someone told you couldn't do, then you set yourself in a prison, because it plays in your mind when you're going for that job, or when you're getting, when you're writing that application for university. When that person's voice says, you're a failure, you're never going to be anything, and you hold on to that voice and you don't forgive it, you start to believe it. But when you say, I forgive you because I deserve it, and I'm going to do this because I know I can, then you set yourself free and you get to live a life that is beyond your wildest dreams and your wildest imagination. And so that is why I want each and every one of you to look at your life today and realize that you are powerful. You have the key within yourself. No one else, not your mother, not your father, not your cousin, no one can tell you who you are, because you have the power to release it. You have the power to forgive, and you have the power to achieve anything in the world that you want for yourself. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you so much for the honor of having me here today, for listening to my story. And I feel so privileged to be able to connect with you today. So thank you.
Thank you for your inspiring, brave, and pertinent words. It's incredible how you're able to share such a personal experience and the importance of learning resilience and forgiveness. I am personally very moved and, again, inspired. And if you still want to learn Spanish here at school, we will be very, very helpful to help you with that. The people here, the students here that are watching, had previously prepared some questions for you. So let's hear them so you can answer them. Thank you so much again.
Hi everyone, my name is Calu Rivas. I am a student from Gimnasio Moderno, and our question is, our country is characterized by great resentment and great difficulty in forgiving. How we can get rid of the pride and achieve definitive forgiveness for those groups outside the law that harm society?
Thank you so much for that beautiful question, Calu Rivas. I'm going to learn how to say it correctly. And thank you for that powerful, powerful question. I think sometimes we look at our countries and we look at our politicians to save us and to, heal the wounds of the countries that we come from. I am from South Africa. We have deep conflict here. Colombia has got deep conflict and woundings. We know a lot of countries. I think the biggest thing as citizens that we can do for ourselves to heal our country is to heal our own pain and to heal our own families. Because when we start from within ourselves and within our own homes, then that becomes, first it starts with you, then it becomes your family, and then your family becomes your neighborhood, and then through your neighborhood it becomes your country, right? And so if each and every one of us just commit to healing us and commit to our own, figuring out what's hurting us, why we feel this way, why we are where we are, and forgiving it and releasing it, then each and every person becomes a country, right? So then we no longer need to look at politicians. We no longer need to look at the people out there. We just need to look at ourselves. And if each and every one of us can take responsibility for where we are and what we do, what we realize is it's the citizens that hold the power, not the politicians, right? And so if we can become more healed as people, we will have a better kind of politician that represents us, but we will have a stronger voice because we will understand what we need as a country in order to move forward. So I would say that it is so important that if you want to change your country, start with yourself and start with your own healing. And if each of us can commit to that, it will change the world we live in.
Remember in our personal power that we do have something to contribute. When we heal, we can help to heal our community as well. I think that is very important to remember. Let's hear the next one.
So I wanted to know what should be the most important component of forgiveness? The perpetrator's right to be forgiven and to move on, or the victim's right to be liberated and freed from those circumstances or painful situations?
Wow, that is so powerful. That is so beautiful. So thank you for that incredible question. And I think for me, I always think that it is the victim's right to freedom that is the most important when you're forgiving. Because as the victim, you did not choose that pain. You did not choose that trauma, and you did not choose that situation or circumstance. So when you hold on to it, what you don't realize that you are doing is you are actually giving that power away to the person who hurt you, because they go on with their life, right? Every time you are angry, they don't feel it. Their life isn't impacted by your pain or your trauma. So it is about your right to being free from that pain. It's about your right to choosing your next step and how you choose to move forward. Because how I always compare it is, if someone pinches me, you're not going to feel that pain, right? It's just like trauma. It's just like pain. So every time someone pinches you, that person is not feeling the pain. You are. So when you live it in your mind and you hold on to the anger and you let it keep eating you inside, you're the one in pain, not them. So it's very important to understand that forgiveness is first and most importantly about you. The second part is about the other person. And that part I refer to more as reconciliation. When you sit down with that person and you choose to speak to them, or you choose to tell them, I forgive you. But for me, that is not the most important. The most important is about getting, yourself into a place whereby you feel empowered and you feel as though you have overcome something and it no longer controls you. And that is the biggest thing. Forgiveness is about making sure that the situation and the trauma no longer controls your life. So thank you for that beautiful question.
Very powerful question. I agree. Let's have the next one.
I didn't hear the question.
Me neither.
There was no audio. Okay.
There wasn't any audio, I think. It sounded cut off. Let's double check that. 1 second.
No problem.
still not working. Another second. Maybe it's the transmission. While we wait, there has been many comments on how, like, the impact that your words have caused in the community. People are very, very grateful for those inspiring words, and about the personal power that you.
People say
There we
that
go.
forgiving is forgetting. I personally do not believe in this, but I wanted to ask you if you believe that forgiving is also forgetting.
Wow. Yeah, I'm very glad we got the audio fixed on that one. And just firstly, I just want to acknowledge that I'm blown away by just how these questions are coming and just how thoughtful. And already, I feel like I'm more inspired by you all. So thank you so much for this. And as for is forgiving forgetting, no, no, I completely agree with you. Forgiving is not forgetting, because you can't forget trauma, right? You cannot forget pain. And so whenever people tell you to forgive and forget, don't listen to them. It is not about forgetting, because when you forget, you lose the lesson, right? Because even in pain, we can learn something. So when something has hurt us, it is about taking in that lesson that you got from that situation or that incident or that trauma and saying, I'm going to keep the lesson, but release the pain. And so you will always remember. You will always remember. The key is, though, and this is what I want everyone to know, the key is not forgetting. The key is to remove the emotional attachment you hold to the incident. What does that mean? It means that when you remember that moment, that thing, that person, you do not have a reaction in your emotions. You are not angry. You are not, I want to hurt this person. It doesn't physically impact you. You can think about it, you can acknowledge it, but it no longer has control over your emotions. Because one thing to understand is whatever controls your emotions controls your life. Because if someone has the power to just make you angry, to just make you upset, they control you, right? But when people don't have that power, then you control you. And it is so important that all of us have the power to control our own emotions and choose when we're going to be upset, when we're going to react. And when you are angry and when you are hateful or when you are resentful towards someone, they get to choose. And that is not their right. You should have that power. So no, forgiving is not forgetting.
Okay. There's a lot of questions, and I know people from the audience are also eager to ask you so many things. Unfortunately, because of the time, we only have time for one more question that was asked by our students. These questions were made from all the schools that are present here today with us. And let's hear the last one.
My name is Juana, and I wanted to ask you something. Who taught you to forgive the way you did, or what inner process did you even have to go to finally forgive him? Thank you.
Oh, I love that. So for me, the forgiveness process was something I had to do. And it is, I told you guys when I was 16, my body was killing me. So not only was I getting the anger, that we all get when we think about pain or people that hurt us, but it was literally killing my body. My body was breaking apart because of the stress I was holding on to. Because anytime I would think about Eugene, my body would react. I would go into hot flushes and my heart would race and I would get angry, but I wouldn't get angry for a day. I'd get angry for days and days, and I'd think and I think and I think and I think. And so eventually, when I went to the doctor told me that my whole body was now reacting just from a place of pain, from a place of anger and from a place of resentment. And so what I had to realize on my journey to transformation and healing was that if I did not take control over my own emotions, I was going to die. And so it is so important for us to realize that when we hold on to these emotions that constantly go up and down and they make us stressed out and stay in our minds, it harms us. And it doesn't only harm our minds and the way we think and how we make decisions, but it harms our bodies too. And so for me, it was a matter of life and death. If I didn't forgive Eugene, I was going to die. So it wasn't really an option, and no one had to tell me. I needed to make that decision on my own, that I needed to forgive in order to heal. And I could only heal once I had forgiven.
Thank you, Candice, again so much. We are so grateful for all of those tales that you can share with us, for your personal experience. I imagine how hard it must have been, that process, and you being here with us and sharing that story with the world. It is very inspiring. Again, it's empowering for us as a country that we have also a similar story, like you said, and we want to heal as a country, we want to heal as individuals. So that process that you talk about, I imagine it has to be hard, but it's necessary, and it's very important that we continue to do it day by day. And healing is so important and so necessary for the whole world in such, like, in the conditions we are in right now. So it's such a big pleasure to have you today. We have some also words from our the headmaster of the school, that she's here with us, and she wanted to talk to you also.
Candice, muchísimas gracias. Nos estás dando a todos unas grandes lecciones de vida. Me siento como rectora del Colegio Ignacio Los Portales muy orgullosa que mis estudiantes te escuchen y que entiendan más allá de cómo cuidarse en ellas mismas y protegerse, que nadie nos domine en la vida sino nosotros mismos, con los principios y valores que cada uno tiene. Estoy completamente de acuerdo contigo que no se olvida, pero sí se logra perdonar. Hoy nos das un testimonio maravilloso y es una inspiración para grandes reflexiones para todos los que nos están escuchando. Muchísimas gracias por tu tiempo y por esa gran generosidad de poder transmitir lo que viviste, pero lo reflejas en tu ser. Hay mucho amor en ti y así lo recibimos a través de la virtualidad. Muchísimas gracias a ti y a todos los que nos escucharon en esta gran conferencia.
She's also very grateful with you for your time and your generosity with your words here today. She completely agrees with you, and that she's very happy that our students and everybody that is listening to us here is able to learn from your experience about how to forgive and how to take care of each other, of each one, and how important it is self-care and to heal. And that she's very happy that we all got to hear that testimony, your testimony. She also wants to thank you for your time, your generosity, and all the love that you came to share with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, both of you, and everyone. Thank you, everyone that has been a part of making this come together. Caro, everyone on the call, and everyone watching. It is such a tremendous honor for me to be here, and I thank you. I thank each and every one of you for having me and welcoming my story and engaging in it. And like I said, those questions were brilliant, and I do a lot of talks around the world. And I can genuinely say these are some of the best questions I've received. So I'm so honored, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. And I cannot wait to see you know, how each and every student that's on this call goes on to impact the world, because judging from those questions, you are all going to do incredible things in the world. And I'm very privileged to be a very small part of that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you again. And again, the comments in the comment section is filled with kind and like loving words for you and how strong and inspiring you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Daniela. Thank Beatrice. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Candy, so much.
Bye-bye.
Laura, tienes el micrófono apagado.
Muchas gracias por esta maravillosa intervención de Candice. Gracias a todas y todos los que se conectaron. Bien, pero esto no acaba acá. Vamos a hacer un breve receso hasta las 9:40. A las 9:40 los esperamos en nuestra siguiente parte. Se les envió a sus correos una escarapela en donde pueden hacer el link cuando la abren para la siguiente parte. Sabemos que vienen 4 paneles donde vamos a estar compartiendo con otras personas de organizaciones y de instituciones de todo el territorio colombiano. Los 4 paneles son apátridas, problemas en frontera, el otro es uso y abuso de los recursos naturales, está soluciones para una Colombia en conflicto y también nuevas prácticas y nuevas soluciones. Allí vamos a estar conversando con estas personas también maravillosas de 9:40 a 10:35. Luego tenemos otro breve receso e iremos directamente a los talleres con estas personas. Como les dije, todo deben tenerlo en sus correos, en el PDF, solamente es que hagan clic. Allí vamos a estar en un Meet. Esperen a que los autoricen en la entrada y vamos a estar ahí muy pendientes. Muchísimas gracias por su asistencia, gracias a Candice y gracias pues, a todo el colegio.